Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frederick Gross.
My name is Sydney Sykes. We are the co-founders of BLCK VC, a nonprofit focused on empowering Black investors and increasing diversity in venture. On behalf of BLCK VC, thank you all for joining us today. Just a few hours ago, the funeral and memorial service for George Floyd began. It goes without saying that his death was a tragedy and should never have happened. What's even more tragic is the fact that for many Black Americans who watched the video, it was anything but shocking. Heartbreaking, but not a shock. What happened was just the newest example in a long history of racism in this country. For the past week, protesters have gathered across the United States to fight both institutional and societal racism. While these protests were spurred by the police brutality that led to the death of George Floyd, they're the result of growing collective frustration and exhaustion felt by Black and brown bodies throughout this country. A frustration at the fact that Black Americans are dying at 2.5 times the rate of white Americans due to COVID-19. A frustration at the fact that Black Americans disproportionately work in so-called essential roles and are being asked to risk their lives, along with so many other of the lowest rungs of our economic ladder, all without any real acknowledgement of the greater risks they face and the greater value they contribute.
Over 155 years ago, we as a country abolished slavery. And over 56 years ago, we passed the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1864. And yet, as of 2020, the Black community still finds itself living with economic and social shackles. The median white family has nearly 10 times the wealth of the median Black family in the United States. Furthermore, we incarcerate Black bodies that look just like me at over 5 times the rate of white Americans. And as the case of George Floyd has shown to this country, even making it to jail isn't always a guarantee for Americans who happen to be born Black. These facts speak to the reality that the systems of this country were not built to support, empower, or enrich the lives of Black Americans. They were built to maintain a semblance of perceived order and balance for the very group that had benefited from unjust systems since before the founding of this country, a group that continues to benefit to this day. This is why we as Black members of this community, along with our allies, won't wait to fight racial inequality. We won't wait to shine a light on our own tech and VC communities. We won't wait anymore to ring the alarm when we see runaway inequality pervasive in our own backyards. Because bias, overt or not, along with structural racism are alive and well right here and there. How else do we as a community account for the fact that only 2% of VC investors are Black, or that only 1% of VC-backed founders are Black today? In fact, today on this very live stream, we have 10 times more viewers than there are Black venture investors in America. We need to stop making excuses. We as a community of allies need to decide that we won't wait anymore to change these horrible statistics, because waiting will only continue to contribute to the growing inequality as technology itself continues to grow in its influence and might, not just here in the United States, but globally. Because if left unchecked, our industry is on a trajectory that will only amplify these inequalities.
This event today serves to honor the lives lost due to institutional racism, and to reflect on how that very same institution rears its ugly head through the existence of our very own, through the experiences of our very own founders and investors. We've also been able to raise more than $75,000 for nonprofits that fight institutional racism. So thank you to our allies for that. Now, for the next 4 minutes, we'll ask you to be silent, to reflect on the people who have died from racial inequality and those who fight it today. We will now begin our moment of silence. Thank you all for participating in that moment of silence. We're now going to lead into some of the members of our community speaking about their experiences, starting with Terry Burns.
Thanks, Sid. Hey, everyone. Morning, afternoon, evening, wherever it is you're dialing in from. As Sid mentioned, I'm Terry Burns, and I work at GV, Google Ventures. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about what's been on my mind recently, and given all of the events that have happened the last few days and weeks. I've been thinking a lot about systems, and I think a lot of the folks who, a lot of the Black folks that are dialed in right now can probably empathize with this, thinking about it a lot in the last few days, but also really my entire life. I grew up in a very Black family in Long Beach, California, where I was loved and supported and curious, and had never, ever heard of Silicon Valley until I was 18, and definitely not venture capital until a few years later, which, to be clear, wasn't that long ago. So when I think about my life and my role as a venture capitalist, and as a working individual, Black individual who's been given a lot of opportunity, and I think it's worth noting that this is the case for many of us that are on the call right now. And when I contextualize that with systems in America, and these systems are far and few in between, include institutionalized racism, the police force, and very importantly, as venture capitalists, I think it's important for us to note capitalism itself is a system that has manifested and grown and presents itself in a number of different ways. When I contextualize my life and my job and my experience with these systems, I recognize that my life, my job, the opportunities that I've been given as a Black woman is an example of a system failure, because the system was not designed for me as an individual to experience any of this. The system wasn't designed for me and my family to be healthy, for me to have a stable job, for me to try, as I do, as many of the folks on this call and many of the folks that we're going to hear from today try to do, to deploy capital to Black entrepreneurs and creatives, to support Black entrepreneurs and creatives. The system was designed for none of this to be the case. And so as I reflect on George Floyd, that was not an example of a system failing. Eric Gardner was not an example of the system failing. Breonna Taylor was not an example of the system failing. And countless others whose names we should say and whose names we'll never know were not examples of the system failing. It's exactly how the system was designed. And so from where I sit in a system, again, that is designed against me and my brothers and sisters, and recognizing that for me, it has failed in some ways, which I'm grateful for, that I have been given a lot of the opportunities that I have. The choice that I'm presented with, that many of us are presented with, that the folks really who the system is designed for are presented with, the choice is the work that's to be done for Black folks. And that's to hold, to support, to fund, and to take risks for the people for whom the system was designed against. And I wish I could say at this moment that there was a lot to look forward to, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a long road. And organizations like Black VC, I think, hold a lot of space and do make me optimistic in some sense. And it's going to be a lot of work from folks in this room and folks that are not in this room. And that's the choice that we're all presented with. And that's really been what's weighing on me the last few days. Thank you all for taking the time to listen.
Thank you, Terry. That was really powerful to hear about our responsibility. Next up, Van Jones is going to speak. Hey, Van.
I'll share my thoughts. Yeah, I think it works now. Thanks, Terry, for sharing your thoughts, and thanks, guys, for giving me the opportunity to speak. What what comes to mind for me is the very region and where I'm located. I'm a venture capitalist at Drive. We're a large shop here in the Midwest, and I sometimes think that the Midwest gets forgotten for the amazing pool of talent, the economic power filled with large corporations, and the core industries that make our nation work are located here. But unfortunately, it's also home to some of the largest concentrations of segregation in the United States. Of the 8 most segregated cities in the United States, 6 are in the Midwest. 5 of the 6 metropolitan areas in which concentrated poverty among Blacks exceeds 40% are also in the Midwest. As Terry was mentioning earlier, these realities are rooted in segregated systems and policies like redlining, which divide entire communities from economic opportunities even today. For example, my parents were born when redlining was very much still legal. As I grew up, I saw persistent reminders that I wasn't fully valued. And as I matured, this created discomfort around classmates and colleagues. We talk about pattern recognition a lot, and the pattern that I recognized that every time I got closer and let my guard down, I felt burnt. In college, upon winning a video game, I was called the N-word by a white roommate who lost and felt it was not my place to win. At the beginning of my career, on many occasions, I shrank and became invisible as I heard coworkers discussing neighborhoods and realizing that mine was apparently wild and dangerous and not fit for the people that I worked with. And later, I either failed to see Blacks in senior leadership or paid at the same level as their peers. I was never comfortable, but that same discomfort led me to a career in China, launching a venture in Nigeria, and now here in Columbus as a VC. In fact, the drive to move forward is part of everyone's story on this call. One of my good friends, a former track star and current banker, describes the race that we run as like being in lane 8 with a weight vest and cement boots. There's no reason why we should be having conversations today that we had in the 1960s. The failures of systems aren't going to be corrected until we're honest. The kind of intellectual honesty that directly addresses the bias that we are bringing in the room, in our lives, in our work, and in how we make decisions. And now, while national policy matters need to be addressed, I think a great opportunity here is for firms on this call to consider their roles in addressing diversity and inclusion on independent board seats with hiring, talent management, and mentoring, not only for your firm, but the portfolio companies you invest in. You need to track diversity metrics and work towards measurable goals, and then create supportive environments full of high expectations that all investors can rise to. So let's work with local city councils to promote anti-racist policies, which is an activity the Drive is involved in. Let's do more with founders so that there are no surprises for what is and what is not venture. Let's craft a public commitment and a plan to reshape this industry. Thank you very much for learning and listening.
Van, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for sharing some of the stories that stick with all of us from when we're young all the way through when we're working and that we experience every day, but you don't forget those. Next up, Elise is going to speak.
Thank you, Sid, Brad, BLCK VC. I'm Allie Smith, and I'm the CEO of Praxis Labs. We're a learning and development company focused on advancing inclusion and belonging for workforces. We provide immersive perspective-taking learning experiences in VR, as well as advanced analytics and insights on our learning and reflection platform with the goal of increasing empathy, reducing bias, and creating sustained behavior change for individuals and organizations. Each day, I put on my armor to face the world. I muster up a calmness that covers me from the incidents of microaggression. I pull out a shield to cover my heart, which in moments like these is grieving the loss of brothers and sisters like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and many, many more. It's this cover, this armor that allows me to show up in the predominantly white ecosystem that is entrepreneurship and that is venture capital. As a Black woman in this world, I constantly feel that my experience is questioned and sometimes invalidated. You see, racism and racial bias can be insidious in the sense that I'm rarely able to confirm that I was treated differently because I am Black. That would require recognition and acknowledgement from another party, someone who, due to the sometimes unconscious nature of bias, may not even know themselves. As a Black entrepreneur pursuing Praxis Labs, a venture focused on diversity and inclusion, I feel the need to prove that my existence is valid at work. As you know, the majority of people in positions of power in the VC industry are not Black. They have not experienced the incidents of bias or discrimination or racism that I and many other Black people, and quite frankly, historically underrepresented folks have. Will I be invited into that room where the decisions are made? I find myself asking. Even with all the privileges I have, once I'm in the room, will I even be heard? I worry about unconscious biases like affinity bias, a bias that means we gravitate towards people like ourselves and that we may dislike and even avoid people who are different than us. By simply being a Black woman, I am immediately disadvantaged when I walk in to meet with a VC. Even after the barriers I've overcome and the distance I've traveled that others haven't, I could be overlooked or discounted because VCs have options, and it's easier to bet on someone who you understand. I've heard VCs tell aspiring entrepreneurs to find the big thorny problems that they've encountered in their lives or that they're uniquely familiar with and to go solve those. But what happens when the problem that you want to solve isn't one that is faced by the people who make decisions about who gets funded and who doesn't? While no VC has blatantly told me, I personally don't believe in diversity and inclusion, I have heard pushback like, well, it's a very niche challenge, or I'm not sure diversity and inclusion has staying power. It might be a fad, or we might move on from this topic. Again, I have to prove that my experience with bias and discrimination is valid, that my experience is not niche, that this problem is pervasive, and that it is a detriment to a more productive and inclusive society. It's exhausting. Although I am making this case professionally, it is inherently personal, which makes it doubly exhausting. I also have to acknowledge that whoever said that to me, that piece that diversity and inclusion may not have staying power, well, I have to acknowledge that whoever said that is right. Diversity and inclusion and equity work will only have staying power when the people in power, more often than not who are white, make it have staying power. When our white allies and accomplices believe that this work is important, that it is necessary, and that it is worth funding, putting resources, strategy, and intentionality behind it for the long run. That is when we can really dig into the work of racial justice and racial equity. And until that day comes, until resources are aligned with this goal, until commitment is met with action, I will continue to put on my armor. So thank you to Black VC, to the others sharing their thoughts on this call, and to my Black brothers and sisters, I see you, I love you, I'm in solidarity with you, Black Lives Matter.
Thank you so much, Elise. All of those quotes ring true to me. I'm sure many of us in venture and on the entrepreneur side have heard them. And thank you for showing support for your community, for me. Brent will be speaking next.
All right. Thanks to everyone. Elise, that was great. It's great to follow that. I'm Brent Baltimore. I'm on the investment team at Greycroft, based in the LA office. And really, I just want to take this moment to speak to my trajectory in this space and venture and how I got into the role, and hopefully highlight what I think is kind of one of the key issues for why there aren't many folks of color, folks that look like me, that are in this space. And I hope to really kind of push us forward as an asset class to solving this problem. So realistically, venture capital is the least accessible role in finance for minorities. Why is this? To me, it's because your raw effort, doesn't take you far enough. There's no mock portfolio to build. There's your, early stage technology. It doesn't necessarily need your modeling skills. More often than not, our passion, creativity, and work ethic can only be unlocked by someone that is physically in this space already. Someone must answer the phone, they must reply to the LinkedIn message, and that's not enough. My path to VC, like many of us, and potentially many of you, took multiple years. Emails, research, what have you, to find that person that would dedicate the time. So I'll dive into that. Typically, when you send 100 emails and you get 3 responses, true story, that subset of responses comes back with a few well-intentioned recommendations. Read a blog, memorize SaaS metrics, research an industry, but do those blogs and reverse engineering models and does that research prepare you for an interview? It doesn't. There was one person that, and it's funny, I emailed him this morning. I was trying to put together what I wanted to say. He went a step far further. We got on the phone. He asked me, what do you think makes a good VC investor? And what would make you better than most? And I didn't know. I didn't have an answer for that. The blogs, the models, the research, they don't have answers to that question. They don't say, explain your thesis this way, or make sure that your memo is written like this, cover these sections. When you're performing cohort analysis, make sure it's formatted like this so that it's clear to the reader. He would challenge me eventually to fly to San Francisco. And thankfully, I was fortunate enough to come out of banking. I had the resources to do that. Many of us don't. And we sat down. He gave me the how, the what, and the why behind, at the time, behind the associate role, and now at a different stage and trajectory. And I took that context and I crafted a stronger thesis. And I learned to speak the language of VC. This was the foundation I needed to earn a seat in this world. This is the apprenticeship model that many of us across this space know well. The concept of apprenticeship is baked into our industry, but Black recruits are often not given that foundational knowledge, the how-to, the why. For the VCs on the line, again, thank you for taking the time. But you know as well as I know, apprenticeship is part of the engine that powers your investment thesis. Your diligence processes involve expert references. In some cases, you bring these experts into your firm as venture partners, operating partners. You're consistently stepping out of your role as a partner, a principal, an associate, an analyst, and becoming an apprentice yourself, so that then you can distribute dollars and invest in companies with confidence. So as we start to think about what diversifying our space and this asset class looks like, one way to do that is to help even the playing field. Pass on those same foundational concepts, that knowledge that was given to you. Let's figure out a way to work together to scale this. Many of us are working on it now. Reach out. We'd love to partner with you and really kind of attack this problem head on. Again, thank you for taking the time and listening. I hope you reach out soon.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you for telling us what that looks like and what being an ally really means. It can be a lot of work, but I think getting into venture can be a lot of work too. So I appreciate you sharing that. Next up, Monique Woodard will be speaking.
Hi, everyone. I'm Monique Woodard, and I started my career in tech as a founder. I've been a founder twice, and then I moved on to the investor side of the table, first at 500 Startups, then scouting for Lightspeed, and now as GP and raising a new fund, Cake Ventures. And so I come to this conversation having seen some of the challenges from a lot of different vantage points. When I moved here, when I moved to Silicon Valley in 2008, I was going to demo days and I was going to events, and my friends and I would see no other Black entrepreneur in the room. And this was not that long ago. 2008 sounds like a long time ago, but it's really not. And so we started Black Founders. But what we learned through starting Black Founders and trying to build the ecosystem of entrepreneurs was that if we weren't touching capital, all of that ecosystem building was for nothing, because VCs were still not investing in Black founders. And so then I moved on to the investor side of the table, because I knew that this is my life's work and that something has to change. Over the last few weeks, a lot of my peers, my white peers, have reached out to ask what they can be doing and what they should be doing to help. And so I have a few things that I think they should be doing and thinking about. The first is to act within your sphere of influence. Black founders are often over-mentored and underinvested. Check your desire to open up office hours and mentor exclusively versus your ability to write a check. If you can do both, that is wonderful. But if you have the ability to write a check, but you will only offer mentorship to Black founders, that is only helpful to your ego. Recognize that the funding gap for Black founders starts on day zero. With less access to friends and family capital, entrepreneurs are less able to meet the metrics that will allow them to raise institutional capital. Any initiative to democratize access to capital for Black founders has to start at the earliest stages. Without it, founders will not make it to the later stages. I support in full the development of new models, new nonprofits, donor-advised funds, and we should absolutely be supporting those nonprofits who are trying to eliminate the racial bias in our industry. Not having any startups led by Black founders in your portfolio is a failure that can't be donated away. There are excellent founders running businesses today that deserve investment and not charity. We should also be well beyond this idea of separate but equal. But in venture, it seems as though we are moving right back there. Black entrepreneurs don't need a separate water fountain. You have to fix the systemic issues in your funds that keep Black founders out and keep you from delivering better returns. And then finally, I say this as a Black GP who has gone into many meetings with LPs. Invest in and support funds led by Black GPs. Most of the Black investors over the last several years, way before Black VC started, we became investors by raising our own funds, because a path into venture through partnership was so rarely available to us. And yet we have not had equitable access to LP dollars, institutional or otherwise, resulting in smaller and more hard-won funds than our white peers. I've said so many times, and a lot of the GPs on this call will empathize, that raising a fund is like crawling through glass. Raising a fund as a Black person is like crawling through glass with no clothes on. And then raising a fund as a Black woman is like crawling through glass with no clothes on and covered in fire ants. But we do it anyway because we believe that there is change to be had. And we will not wait, because Black lives do matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. I think that's really powerful to hear, especially we've been hearing a lot about from the Black community about the idea of investing in Black founders, Black entrepreneurs, Black investors. And that's not help, that's investing. So thank you for speaking to that. Next, we have Delane, who's going to speak a bit.
My name is Dwayne. I'm the CEO of Play Versus, an LA-based esports startup that's raised almost 100 million since I started the company 2 years ago. Today, I'm going to talk about my best friend, Corey Jacobs, who dreamed of working in this business and in the late 80s went to school for engineering. Along the way, he made one bad mistake to sell weed as a means to survive. That one nonviolent mistake almost cost him his life, though. A white judge sentenced him to 18 life sentences with no possibility of parole, basically execution, as if Corey's life was worthless. But it's not. You see, Corey and I are very similar people and have had similar upbringings. He made one mistake. I've made several, but I'm here. We all are, and we're lucky for it. I have no doubt that had Corey been able to realize his dream, he would have broken down barriers and made a name for himself in the Valley, even in the 90s. And maybe we'd be further along as far as representation in tech goes. Maybe we'd be having a different conversation today. But since we're here, and because we're the lucky ones with the opportunity Corey and many of our ancestors wanted, I encourage us all to be more like Corey and not only dream, but do. Even though Corey was sentenced to 18 life sentences, he never lost hope and gave into his environment. He studied law, he finished school, he built programs, he created community. And in 2016, after serving 16 years in prison, Obama granted him clemency. Corey now runs a billion-dollar business as a partner to Diddy and has helped free over 47 Black and brown people who were sentenced to life without parole for nonviolent drug offenses through his organization, the Buried Alive Project. We all have an opportunity to do our part today. I recognize the output of that might be nuanced, but since we're all in tech, I have a few ideas, particularly related to improving representation in tech. If you're a VC, hire at least one Black partner and give them the opportunity to bring in a Black analyst or principal. Talk to your partners and LPs, commit some amount of money to fund founders of color. Even if it's small, that's okay. You just have to start. Hire a Black recruiter who can help your companies build diverse pipelines so they hire Black and brown people earlier and more often. If you're a Black founder, don't give up. I know it's tough. I know the journey's hard, but it's worth it. Keep going. And if I can help, let me know. I'm Delane at playversus.com and at Delane on Twitter and IG. If you're a non-Black founder, be intentional and proactive about hiring Black talent. We might not have the traditional Valley backgrounds, but we're passionate, we're talented, we will work hard. Give us a shot. Your probability of success is lower if you don't. Big thanks to the team that organized this conversation today. I hope everyone takes their responsibility seriously. And if not for yourself, for Corey Jacobs, for George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, Sean Bell, Eric Gardner, Ayanna Jones, Mike Brown, and the countless others who didn't get the opportunity we have to realize their dreams because of the many ways the system humiliates and oppresses Black and brown people. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Delane. It's always really powerful to hear those names, and it's also great to see you succeeding. We need more people like you. Next, we're gonna have Eliot wrap things up.
Hello. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to everyone that's attended, all those that spoke. My role here is a little bit different. I'm here to wrap things up, summarize some things that have been said. But in light of what's happening in this country and what's been happening for a long time, I am going to share a brief story before I do that. So by way of introduction, I'm Eliot. I'm the son of two parents who were part of the first integrated class at Vanderbilt. I'm a proud Morehouse College graduate, 15-year veteran of the venture capital industry, founding board member of BLCK VC, and I'm an investing partner at Bessemer Venture Partners, where I lead the growth equity practice. So, you know, I spent 5 years in venture before taking a break to go to Columbia Business School. Upon graduation, I couldn't get a job in venture. To be clear, I was inundated with non-investing venture job offers. To be even more clear, people who are Black, we want a fair shot at those roles too. But after 5 years as an investor at a venture fund pre-business school, I took a break after one of the investments went public, and I couldn't get a job post-business school. Where I did get a job was actually in Toronto, Canada. So I spent 4 years there as a growth equity investor with Georgian partners, and upon moving back to California, I couldn't get a job again. It took forever. When I finally got one, there was one night that I'll just never forget. I lived in Canada for 4 years. I happened to be staying with my girlfriend, now wife, at the Westin on El Camino. And from a 4-block walk from that Westin to a PF Chang's at Stanford Mall, 3 cop cars jumped the curb, pinned me to the ground at gunpoint because someone called the police and said, there's a large Black man who looks lost walking down El Camino looking for trouble. The reason I share that story is because it's a reminder to everyone on this call, particularly those in the venture capital industry, that even in Palo Alto, I was one wrong move away from being a hashtag. less than 1 mile away from Sand Hill Road. Just think you need to let that sink in. It doesn't matter where I went to school, what fund I work for, what boards I've been on, how much money I've invested, how many companies have gone public. Because I'm a Black man in this country still today in 2020, I wake up every day just not trying to become a hashtag. So now back to what I'm actually supposed to do. I just want to take some summary points, try to help. So one thing that we really care about as we're talking about improving diversity in the industry, we do a really good job of giving advice to our portfolio companies on metrics. Some of the speakers already talked about it, but one thing I would add to that is, as venture capitalists, we're really good at making things public. Blog posts, Zoom town halls, Twitter posts. Pick some metrics around diversity, make them public, and hold yourselves to it. If you only do it internally, it's very likely that you'll just let them slide. Another thing, diversity theater. This is a big topic for me. So we're in this really interesting time where it feels like venture capitalists and the venture community is kind of in a rush to get things out there. And we appreciate it. We're very, very appreciative of the effort. But as many of the speakers have already said, just make it institutional. You don't even really have to market it. If you're doing the right thing, everyone will see it, and let the community speak about it. We talk to each other every day and we know. And I think the last two things that I'll talk about, there's been this movement to do office hours, and I commend that too. A lot of non-Black venture investors have been opening their time saying, look, every week or for the next month, I'm only going to talk to Black founders. We're into that, but again, make that institutional. But in the spirit of matching, what I'm going to do as a tenured kind of senior venture investor, I'm going to match that. I'm going to make my calendar public, but it's not just to talk to founders. I do that every day. I don't need to post about that. I'm going to share my calendar, match office hours to talk to funds that do not have a Black or brown investing professional on staff who want guidance, who want help in recruiting and mentoring and shepherding these people to make sure that they have a good career experience. So watch out for that. We'll make that public. It's something that I'm super passionate about. But again, I really do appreciate all the effort that's been made over the last few days. We just want to get to a point where we don't have to wait for something tragic to happen and a big Zoom call with 3,000 attendees to see change. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Fred and Sydney. My last comment would just be to the Black community on this call and beyond, please check on your mental health. I'm struggling with it. I usually don't sleep a whole lot in our tech careers and lives already, but just with shelter in place, all the news articles, all the videos, please check on your mental health. If you need just 5 minutes, reach out to us, people at Black VC, people on the board. I promise you will make the time. So with that, thanks everyone for joining. Please reach out, and Sydney and Fred, I'll pass it back to you.
So first of all, both Sydney and I would like to thank all of the speakers who've courageously stepped up to share their personal narratives and experiences. I think one of the things both Sydney and I want to really truly underline is that these aren't unique experiences. These are symbols and examples, but stories that are felt and that resonate with everyone in this community. And it's important to listen and to hear these stories and really let them sit with you. And as you continue through this day, on this day of action that we've just been called out to our broader community, we want you to reflect on these things and think about how can you all move beyond listening and into action. Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Dwayne, Elise, Eliot, Monique, Terry, and Van for sharing those stories.
Yes, thanks, echoing everything Frederick said. We'd like to thank all of our allies, many of which participated in the We Won't Wait Day of Action. This was a day where we asked firms to primarily discuss racism and their role in that system, donate to charities and nonprofits that support racial justice, and thirdly, to diversify. And for this, we asked firms to share their data publicly or internally related to their portfolio diversity as well as their firm diversity. As we all know, It's a huge problem, but many firms aren't even tracking their diversity data. So I encourage you, even if you're a firm and you're very aware that you have 0 Black partners and 0 Black associates and 0 Black non-investing employees, I encourage you to write down these numbers and to track them. And so that you have to face the fact every month or every year or every time you have an all hands meeting that you still haven't made a change. And I know we have incredible allies who are working really hard and doing everything they can, and they're reaching out to us, and they're reaching out to their friends, and they're reaching out to their network. Keep doing that. Keep trying to improve. This is not a lost cause. We at Black VC will not give up on making venture more diverse, and we hope you won't either. Below are the logos of our partners in this We Won't Wait Day of Action. We'd like to thank these firms for supporting the initiatives that we've done, as well as taking steps to fight racial inequality. You can read more about what the We Won't Wait Day of Action meant on our Medium article, as well as at the link through the splash that. If any of you would like to discuss opportunities to fight against racial inequality and venture more, please reach out to us. You can see our contact information on our website, on our Twitter. We are everywhere, and we are welcome to speak, and we want to work with you. Thank you for attending. We look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you. Bye.